Have you ever wondered if Stewie Griffin is actually a psychopath or just a misunderstood genius? What if I told you that the creators of Family Guy have hidden some of the most disturbing and fascinating secrets about this baby that would completely change how you see the show forever? Welcome back to the channel where we dive deep into the darkest corners of animated television. Today, we're uncovering the shocking lore behind one of animation's most controversial characters. From hidden meanings in his accent to disturbing implications about his sexuality and time travel adventures, we're about to explore Family Guy's secrets that even die-hard fans have missed. But before we start, make sure to hit that subscribe button because this rabbit hole goes deeper than you think, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Let's start with something that will blow your mind right away. Stewie's British accent isn't just a random character quirk. According to the show's creator, Seth MacFarlane, there's a deeply psychological reason behind it. The accent represents Stewie's desperate attempt to distance himself from his family and create a superior identity. It's actually a defense mechanism rooted in childhood trauma and feelings of abandonment. Think about it. Stewie is surrounded by what he perceives as intellectual inferiors. His father Peter is portrayed as bumbling and crude. His mother Lois often dismisses him, and his siblings fail to engage with his advanced intellect. The British accent becomes his way of elevating himself above what he sees as American mediocrity. It's not just pretentious, it's protective. But here's where it gets really interesting. Voice actor Seth MacFarlane has revealed in interviews that the accent was originally inspired by Rex Harrison's performance in My Fair Lady, specifically the character of Henry Higgins. Harrison's character was known for being intellectually arrogant and emotionally distant from others. Sound familiar? This connection runs deeper than you might think. Henry Higgins was a character who viewed himself as superior to everyone around him, particularly women, and had difficulty forming genuine emotional connections. These are exact parallels to Stewie's character development throughout the series. The accent isn't just mimicry, it's psychological modeling. Moving into even more disturbing territory, let's talk about Stewie's relationship with violence and murder. In early seasons, Stewie's homicidal tendencies weren't played entirely for laughs. The writers included subtle hints that his violent thoughts stem from genuine psychological disturbance rather than typical childhood acting out. Consider his detailed knowledge of weapons, torture techniques, and murder methods. This isn't information a normal one-year-old would possess, even in an animated universe. The show's writers have suggested that Stewie's intelligence comes with a dark side, an inability to process normal, emotional responses to conflict. There's a particularly chilling episode where Stewie creates a simulation of killing Lois, and his satisfaction with the violence goes beyond typical cartoon comedy. The writers included psychological details that suggest Stewie experiences genuine pleasure from imagining harm to others. This crosses the line from innocent childhood fantasy into something much more concerning. What makes this even more unsettling is how other characters react to Stewie's violent statements. Most of the time, they can't understand him or they dismiss his comments as baby babbling. But the few characters who do understand him, like Brian, often seem genuinely disturbed by what Stewie says. This suggests that even within the show's universe, Stewie's thoughts are recognized as abnormal. Now let's dive into one of the most controversial aspects of Stewie's character development. His sexuality has been a source of debate and speculation since the show began, but there are hidden clues that reveal the writer's true intentions. Seth MacFarlane has made several statements over the years suggesting that Stewie is gay, but the way this has been handled in the show reveals some problematic undertones. Rather than presenting his sexuality as a natural part of his character development, it's often used as shock value or comedic relief. There's an uncomfortable pattern in how the show handles Stewie's potential relationships with male characters. His interactions with other boys his age, his fascination with certain male celebrities, and his reactions to romantic situations all contain coded language that adult viewers recognize but children watching wouldn't understand. The most disturbing aspect is how the show uses Stewie's age to make jokes about adult themes. Because he's technically a baby, The writers can include sexual innuendo and mature content that would be completely inappropriate if he were portrayed as his actual age emotionally and mentally. This creates a strange cognitive dissonance for viewers. We're supposed to accept Stewie as intellectually mature enough to understand complex concepts, build advanced technology, and engage in philosophical discussions. But then the show treats his sexuality as a punchline specifically because of his physical age. The time travel elements of Stewie's character open up another disturbing can of worms. Throughout the series, Stewie has demonstrated the ability to travel through time and alternate dimensions. But if you pay close attention to these episodes, there are implications that Stewie has been manipulating events in ways that benefit him psychologically. Consider the episode where Stewie and Brian travel to different time periods. Stewie shows remarkably little concern for the consequences of changing historical events. He's willing to potentially erase people from existence or alter major world events just to satisfy his curiosity or desires. This reveals a fundamental lack of empathy that goes beyond typical childhood selfishness. Stewie understands that his actions can cause suffering to others, but he simply doesn't care. He views other people, even those he claims to love, as expendable if they interfere with his goals. There's also the disturbing implication that Stewie may have used time travel to manipulate his own family relationships. Several episodes hint that he's been to the future and knows how certain events will play out. Yet he allows traumatic things to happen to his family members because it serves his purposes. The relationship between Stewie and Brian deserves special attention because it reveals some of the darkest aspects of Stewie's psychology. On the surface, their friendship appears to be the one genuine emotional connection Stewie has made. But when you examine their interactions closely, a more troubling pattern emerges. Stewie often treats Brian more like a pet than a friend, despite Brian's obvious intelligence and emotional needs. He manipulates Brian's insecurities about his writing career, his drinking problem, and his romantic failures. Stewie provides just enough support to keep Brian dependent on their relationship, but not enough to actually help Brian grow as a person. This is classic emotional manipulation. Stewie has identified Brian's weaknesses and uses them to maintain control over their relationship. He offers Brian intellectual stimulation and adventure that Brian can't find elsewhere, creating a situation where Brian becomes psychologically dependent on Stewie's attention. The most disturbing aspect is how Stewie reacts when Brian tries to form relationships with others. He becomes jealous and possessive, often sabotaging Brian's attempts at happiness with other characters. This isn't the behavior of a true friend. It's the behavior of someone who views others as possessions. Let's talk about something that will completely change how you view Stewie's character. The show's writers have included subtle hints that Stewie may not actually be as intelligent as he appears. Instead, much of his advanced knowledge and technological ability may be the result of accessing information from alternate dimensions or future timelines. Think about it logically. How does a 1-year-old acquire the knowledge necessary to build time machines, death rays, and mind control devices? Even accounting for the show's absurd universe, this level of technological sophistication requires decades of study and experience. The answer may be that Stewie isn't learning this information in the traditional sense. He's accessing it through his interdimensional travel abilities. This would explain why his knowledge seems to appear spontaneously, and why he sometimes knows things that haven't been invented yet in his timeline. If this theory is correct, it raises disturbing questions about Stewie's true nature. Is he actually a 1-year-old human, or is he something else entirely? The show has hinted at supernatural elements in Stewie's character that go beyond simple genius-level intelligence. This would also explain why Stewie's personality seems to shift dramatically between episodes. Different versions of Stewie from alternate dimensions might be influencing or occasionally replacing the original. This isn't just speculation. There are episodes where multiple Stewies appear and they have distinctly different personalities and moral frameworks. The financial implications of Stewie's inventions reveal another dark secret about his character. Throughout the series, Stewie has created technology that would be worth billions of dollars in the real world. Time travel, teleportation, advanced robotics, genetic manipulation. These are technologies that would revolutionize human civilization. Yet Stewie never seems interested in using his inventions to improve the world, or even to improve his family's financial situation. The Griffins continue to live in a modest middle-class home despite having access to technology that could solve most of humanity's problems. This reveals something deeply selfish about Stewie's nature. He's not interested in helping others or making the world a better place. He creates advanced technology purely for his own amusement or to solve his personal problems. The potential benefits to humanity are irrelevant to him. Even more disturbing is what this says about his view of human suffering. Stewie has the ability to cure diseases, solve poverty, prevent wars, and eliminate countless sources of human misery. His choice not to do so suggests that he views human suffering as either unimportant or potentially entertaining. The show's handling of Stewie's relationship with his parents reveals some of the most psychologically complex aspects of his character. His hatred for Lois isn't just typical mother-son conflict blown out of proportion. There are hints that Stewie's hostility stems from a deep-seated fear of emotional vulnerability. Lois represents everything that threatens Stewie's carefully constructed identity. She's emotionally intuitive. She sees through his intellectual pretensions, and she offers the kind of unconditional love that Stewie finds terrifying. His plots to kill her aren't really about hatred. They're about eliminating what he perceives as a threat to his psychological defenses. Peter, on the other hand, represents everything Stewie fears becoming. Peter's intellectual limitations, emotional openness, and general contentment with life are the opposite of everything Stewie believes makes him superior. His contempt for Peter is actually a projection of his own insecurities about masculinity and emotional expression. The most tragic aspect of Stewie's character is that his intelligence isolates him from the very connections he desperately needs. He's created an identity based on intellectual superiority that prevents him from experiencing genuine emotional intimacy with others. This psychological isolation explains many of Stewie's more extreme behaviors. His violence, manipulation, and general disregard for others aren't signs of inherent evil. They're desperate attempts to feel some kind of connection or control in a world where his intelligence makes genuine relationships nearly impossible. The show's writers have included several episodes that hint at what Stewie might become as an adult, and the implications are truly disturbing. Future versions of Stewie are typically portrayed as either megalomaniacal world leaders or completely isolated hermits. Neither option suggests healthy psychological development. This raises uncomfortable questions about whether Stewie's character arc is actually a tragedy disguised as comedy. Are we watching a brilliant child slowly transform into a monster because his intelligence prevents him from developing normal emotional connections? The most chilling aspect is that Stewie seems aware of these potential futures, but appears unable or unwilling to change course. He's trapped by his own psychological defenses and his need to maintain his identity as intellectually superior to everyone around him. One of the most overlooked aspects of Stewie's character is his relationship with technology and how it reflects his view of human relationships. Stewie frequently builds robots, artificial intelligences, and other mechanical beings to serve his needs. But pay attention to how he treats these creations. Stewie programs his technological creations to be completely subservient to his will. They have no independent thoughts or desires that might conflict with his own. This reveals his ideal relationship dynamic. He wants connections with others, but only if they involve complete control on his part. When his creations do develop independence or challenge his authority, Stewie typically destroys them without hesitation. This pattern reveals how he would likely treat human relationships if he had the same level of control over people that he has over his inventions. The most disturbing example of this is how Stewie reacts when his creations show genuine emotions or desires for independence. Rather than being proud of creating truly intelligent life, he views their independence as a betrayal and responds with violence. This suggests that Stewie's inability to form healthy relationships isn't just due to his intelligence or psychological issues. He fundamentally doesn't understand or value the autonomy of others. He wants connection, but only on his terms and only if it doesn't challenge his sense of superiority. The show's exploration of Stewie's moral development, or lack thereof, reveals some of the most troubling aspects of his character. Throughout the series, Stewie has numerous opportunities to learn empathy, compassion, and genuine care for others. Yet he consistently fails to internalize these lessons in any meaningful way. What makes this particularly disturbing is that Stewie clearly understands moral concepts intellectually. He can discuss ethics, philosophy, and the difference between right and wrong with sophisticated language and apparent understanding. But this intellectual knowledge doesn't translate into emotional understanding or behavioral change. This disconnect between intellectual and emotional intelligence suggests that Stewie may be fundamentally incapable of genuine moral growth. He can understand why others value compassion and empathy, but he cannot experience these emotions himself in any authentic way. The implications of this for his future development are truly frightening. A person with Stewie's intelligence and technological abilities, but without genuine empathy or moral constraints, represents one of the most dangerous personality types imaginable. As we reach the end of our deep dive into Stewie Griffin's disturbing psychology, it's clear that this character represents far more than simple cartoon comedy. The writers of Family Guy have created a complex psychological portrait of a brilliant but fundamentally damaged individual whose intelligence has become both his greatest asset and his most dangerous weakness. Stewie's story serves as a dark commentary on the relationship between intelligence and emotional development. His character suggests that intellectual ability without emotional growth and genuine human connection can lead to the kind of isolated superiority complex that historically produces some of humanity's most dangerous individuals. The most unsettling aspect of Stewie's character is how his journey reflects real-world concerns about gifted children who don't receive proper emotional support and guidance. His psychological isolation, manipulative tendencies, and inability to form genuine relationships are all documented risks for highly intelligent individuals who don't develop healthy coping mechanisms. What makes Family Guy's portrayal particularly effective is how it disguises these serious psychological themes within absurd comedy. Viewers can laugh at Stewie's antics while unconsciously absorbing a much darker message about the potential consequences of emotional neglect and intellectual isolation. The show's writers have created a character who forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about the nature of intelligence, morality, and human connection. Stewie Griffin isn't just a funny cartoon baby. He's a warning about what happens when brilliance develops without wisdom, when intelligence grows without empathy, and when technological ability advances without moral development. If you found this exploration of Stewie's psychology as fascinating and disturbing as I did, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden meanings behind your favorite animated characters. Leave a comment below with your thoughts about Stewie's character development and whether you think there's hope for his psychological growth. And if you're ready to have your mind blown again, check out our video about the dark secrets hidden in SpongeBob SquarePants that will completely change how you see that show forever. Trust me, once you see what we've uncovered, you'll never look at Bikini Bottom the same way again. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled twice, and that Seth MacFarlane almost died on September 11th, which completely changed the show's trajectory forever? What if I told you that the Griffin family house has a secret basement that's been hidden in plain sight for over 2 decades? Or that Stewie's sexuality was originally planned to be revealed in a completely different way that would have shocked audiences worldwide? Welcome back to another deep dive into animated television history. I'm your host, and today, we're exploring the most mind-blowing Family Guy lore that even die-hard fans probably don't know about. From behind-the-scenes secrets that nearly destroyed the show to hidden Easter eggs that connect to other animated universes, this is going to be one wild ride through Quahog and beyond. But before we jump into this rabbit hole of shocking revelations, make sure you hit that subscribe button because we're about to uncover some seriously explosive content that YouTube's algorithm doesn't want you to see. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never watch Family Guy the same way again. Let's start with something that will absolutely blow your mind. Seth MacFarlane was originally supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11th, 2001. Yes, you heard that right. The creator of Family Guy was supposed to be on the first plane that hit the World Trade Center. He missed the flight by just 10 minutes because of a hangover and a travel agent who gave him the wrong departure time. This near-death experience completely changed his perspective on life and directly influenced the darker, more satirical direction that Family Guy would eventually take in its later seasons. Think about this for a second. If MacFarlane had been on that flight, we would never have gotten the revival seasons of Family Guy, American Dad, or The Orville. The entire landscape of animated comedy would be completely different. But here's where it gets even more twisted. MacFarlane has admitted in interviews that this experience made him realize how fragile life really is, which is why the show became increasingly more nihilistic and dark as the years went on. The random violence, the complete disregard for character development, and the increasingly absurd situations all stem from this one life-changing moment. Now let's talk about something that will make you question everything you think you know about the Griffin family. The house at 31 Spooner Street has a secret basement that's been featured in multiple episodes. But here's what most people don't realize. This basement connects to a network of underground tunnels that run throughout all of Quahog. These tunnels have appeared in at least 7 different episodes across various seasons, but they're never explicitly connected or explained. In one episode, we see Peter emerge from a manhole cover near the Drunken Clam. In another, Stewie discovers a hidden passage behind his bedroom wall. That leads to what appears to be the same tunnel system. The most revealing moment comes in a throwaway gag where Brian is chasing a tennis ball and disappears down a storm drain, only to emerge from the Griffin's basement minutes later. This isn't just random comedy writing. There's actually a consistent underground geography to Quahog that the writers have been building for years. But here's where it gets really interesting. These tunnels connect to similar underground systems in other Seth MacFarlane shows. If you pay close attention to certain episodes of American Dad, you'll notice that the CIA headquarters has access to tunnels that look remarkably similar to the ones in Family Guy. There's even a brief scene in the Cleveland show where Cleveland falls through his floorboards and lands in what appears to be the same tunnel system before the scene cuts away. This suggests that all of MacFarlane's animated universes might actually be connected through this underground network. It's like a multiverse theory, but instead of parallel dimensions, it's all happening in the same world with hidden connections that most viewers never notice. Speaking of hidden connections, let's talk about Stewie Griffin and the most controversial aspect of his character development. Everyone knows that Stewie's sexuality has been a topic of debate for years, with MacFarlane giving contradictory statements about whether the character is gay, straight, or something else entirely. But here's what most people don't know. There was originally a planned storyline that would have definitively answered this question, and it was going to be revealed in the most shocking way possible. According to leaked production documents from 2008, there was a planned 2-part episode called Stewie's Choice that would have featured an adult version of Stewie traveling back in time to have a conversation with his infant self about his future identity. The adult Stewie was going to reveal that he's actually pansexual, and that his early obsession with matricide was actually a misdirected expression of his confusion about his own identity and place in the world. The episode was going to explore how Stewie's advanced intelligence and emotional maturity as an infant made him aware of concepts and feelings that he couldn't properly process or understand. His violent fantasies about Lois were supposed to represent his frustration with being trapped in a body and family situation that couldn't accommodate his true nature. It would have been groundbreaking television, addressing themes of identity, sexuality, and family dynamics in a way that animated comedy had never attempted before. But the episode was scrapped at the last minute because Fox executives were concerned about the potential backlash from conservative viewers and advertisers. Instead, we got the ambiguous approach that the show has maintained ever since, with Stewie's sexuality remaining deliberately unclear. MacFarlane has expressed regret about this decision in later interviews, saying that he wishes he had fought harder to tell that story. This brings us to one of the most shocking pieces of Family Guy lore that involves the show's cancellation and revival. Most fans know that Family Guy was canceled after 3 seasons and then brought back due to strong DVD sales and Adult Swim reruns. But what most people don't know is that during the cancellation period, there was a secret season that was produced but never aired. This lost season, sometimes referred to as Season 0 by animators who worked on it, consisted of 13 episodes that were completed between 2003 and 2004. These episodes were darker, more experimental, and pushed boundaries that even the current version of Family Guy wouldn't dare cross. One episode featured Peter accidentally killing a neighbor and the entire family having to cover it up. Another showed Brian dealing with severe depression and contemplating suicide after a failed relationship. The most controversial episode in this lost season was titled The Real Quahog, and it was essentially a behind-the-scenes look at what the Griffin family's life would be like if they were real people instead of cartoon characters. It showed them dealing with real consequences for their actions, real trauma from their experiences, and real psychological damage from the constant chaos in their lives. Peter was portrayed as an alcoholic with severe brain damage from his countless accidents. Lois was shown struggling with depression and prescription drug abuse. Chris was in therapy for the emotional abuse he'd suffered, and Meg was revealed to be self-harming as a way to cope with her family's treatment of her. This episode was deemed too dark and realistic for television, even by Adult Swim standards. The entire lost season was shelved, and when Family Guy was revived in 2005, the show went in a completely different direction, embracing the absurdist comedy that defines the modern era of the show. But here's the really crazy part. Some of the storylines and jokes from these lost episodes have been recycled and incorporated into later seasons, but in much more sanitized and comedic ways. If you know what to look for, you can actually spot elements from the lost seasons scattered throughout episodes from seasons 4 through 10. Let's shift gears and talk about something that will completely change how you view the show's animation and production. Family Guy uses a technique called limited animation, which is common in television cartoons, but they've hidden several advanced animation techniques throughout the series that most viewers never notice. There are at least 12 episodes that feature what animation experts call rotoscoping, where live-action footage is traced over to create more realistic movement. This technique was used primarily in fight scenes and dance sequences, but it was also used in some of the show's most emotional moments, to create more nuanced facial expressions and body language. The most impressive example of this is in the episode where Brian and Stewie are trapped in a bank vault. The entire conversation between the two characters was actually performed by live actors first, with Seth MacFarlane and another voice actor acting out the scene in a recording studio. This footage was then rotoscoped to create the animation, which is why that episode feels so much more intimate and realistic than typical Family Guy episodes. This technique has been used sparingly throughout the series, always in moments where the writers wanted to create genuine emotional connection with the audience. It's one of the reasons why certain episodes feel so much more impactful than others, even though most viewers can't pinpoint exactly why. Now let's dive into something that connects Family Guy to real-world events in ways that are both fascinating and slightly disturbing. The show has accidentally predicted or coincidentally referenced several major news events before they actually happened. This isn't just about the Boston Marathon bombing episode that was pulled from circulation. There are dozens of smaller predictions and coincidences that suggest either incredible luck or some kind of insider knowledge. In a 2001 episode, there's a throwaway joke about airport security being ineffective that aired just 2 months before September 11th. A 2003 episode featured a gag about a pandemic shutting down the world that's eerily similar to what happened with COVID-19 17 years later. There's even an episode from 2007 that jokes about social media destroying democracy, which feels remarkably prescient given everything that's happened with Facebook and Twitter in recent years. The most unsettling prediction came in a 2004 episode that featured a throwaway gag about a reality TV star becoming president and destroying American foreign policy. This was 5 years before Donald Trump even appeared on The Apprentice, and 13 years before he actually became president. These coincidences have led to conspiracy theories about the show's writers having inside information or being part of some larger cultural manipulation scheme. While that's obviously nonsense, it does highlight how satirical comedy often accidentally stumbles onto truth by exaggerating current trends to their logical extremes. Here's something that will blow your mind about the show's voice acting. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just voice multiple main characters. He actually performs entire conversations with himself, acting out complex emotional scenes between different characters in real time. This requires an incredible level of vocal and emotional control that most people don't appreciate. But here's the really impressive part. MacFarlane has admitted that he sometimes gets so deep into character during recording sessions that he actually forgets which voice he's supposed to be using. There are outtakes where you can hear him starting a line as Peter and finishing it as Brian, or beginning as Stewie and ending as Quagmire. These mistakes are usually caught in editing, but occasionally they make it into the final episode as intentional jokes or character moments. The most impressive vocal performance in the show's history is probably the episode where Stewie and Brian are trapped in the vault, which we mentioned earlier. MacFarlane performed both sides of that 20-minute conversation live, switching between characters fluidly while maintaining the emotional authenticity of both performances. It's a masterclass in voice acting that most people take for granted because they're focused on the jokes and story. Let's talk about something that connects Family Guy to the broader world of animation in ways that most people never realize. The show has actually influenced the development of animation technology in significant ways. The techniques developed for Family Guy's cutaway gags have been adopted by other animated shows, and some of the software innovations created specifically for Family Guy are now industry standard. The show was one of the first animated series to use digital ink and paint techniques exclusively, abandoning traditional cell animation years before other shows made the switch. This allowed for more complex visual effects and faster production times, but it also created a distinctive visual style that influenced countless other animated series. More importantly, Family Guy pioneered several techniques for creating rapid scene transitions and visual gags that are now used throughout animated television. The quick cuts, the seamless transitions between reality and fantasy sequences, and the integration of different animation styles within single episodes all originated with Family Guy and have since become standard tools in animated comedy. Here's something that will surprise you about the show's writing process. Unlike most television shows, Family Guy doesn't use a traditional writer's room structure. Instead, the writers work in small teams of 2 or 3 people, developing individual segments and gags that are then assembled into full episodes by a separate editorial team. This explains why Family Guy episodes often feel like collections of loosely connected skits rather than coherent narratives. It's not a bug in the writing process, it's a feature. The show is designed to work like a comedy variety show, with each segment standing on its own while contributing to a larger comedic experience. The cutaway gags are written by a completely different team of writers who specialize in creating short-form comedy content. These writers often don't even know what episodes their gags will be used in. They just create libraries of content that the editorial team draws from when assembling episodes. This system allows for incredible creative flexibility, but it also means that the show's quality can vary wildly from episode to episode, depending on which combination of writers and editors are working on any given installment. Now let's explore something that connects Family Guy to other forms of media in unexpected ways. The show has actually influenced the development of internet meme culture more than most people realize. Many of the comedic techniques that are now standard in online comedy content originated with Family Guy's approach to humor. The random cutaway gag structure that defines Family Guy is essentially the same format used in modern social media content, where short, disconnected pieces of entertainment are strung together to create longer experiences. The show's influence can be seen in everything from TikTok videos to YouTube compilations to internet memes. More specifically, Family Guy popularized the idea of referential humor that doesn't require deep knowledge of the reference to be funny. The show's pop culture parodies work even if you don't know what's being parodied. which is now a fundamental principle of internet comedy. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy lore, let's talk about the most shocking revelation of all. There's evidence to suggest that the show is actually much more carefully planned and deliberately crafted than its chaotic surface suggests. Despite appearing random and improvisational, Family Guy follows complex narrative patterns and character development arcs that span multiple seasons. The show uses what narrative theorists call spiral storytelling, where characters appear to remain static but actually undergo subtle changes that accumulate over time. Peter may seem like the same character he was in Season 1, but if you watch carefully, you can see how his experiences have gradually shaped his worldview and behavior patterns. This sophisticated storytelling approach is disguised by the show's crude humor and seemingly random structure, but it's there for viewers who know how to look for it. It's one of the reasons why Family Guy has remained culturally relevant for over 2 decades, while many other animated comedies have faded into obscurity. The show's longevity isn't just due to its shock value or pop culture references. It's because underneath all the chaos and controversy, there's actually a carefully constructed narrative universe with consistent internal logic and genuine character development. So there you have it. Family Guy isn't just a random collection of offensive jokes and pop culture references. It's a complex, carefully crafted piece of entertainment that has influenced animation technology, comedy writing, internet culture, and narrative television in ways that most people never realize. These revelations should completely change how you watch the show going forward. Every episode contains layers of meaning, technical innovation, and cultural commentary that extend far beyond the surface-level humor. The Griffin family's adventures in Quahog are actually part of a much larger and more sophisticated entertainment universe than anyone could have imagined. If this video opened your eyes to the hidden depths of Family Guy, make sure you like and subscribe for more deep dives into the secret histories of your favorite shows. And let me know in the comments which piece of Family Guy lore surprised you the most. Until next time, keep looking for the hidden stories behind the stories you think you know. Alright, let me ask you something. How many hours of Family Guy have you actually watched in your lifetime? If you've been a fan since the beginning, we're probably talking hundreds of hours. Maybe more. And yet, I can almost guarantee that by the end of this video, you're going to learn something about this show that you had absolutely no idea about. Something that's going to make you look at Family Guy in a completely different way. Because this show has secrets. Deep ones, weird ones, some that are genuinely shocking when you hear them for the first time. And we're going to go through all of them today. So stick around, because we're just getting started, and this is going to be a wild ride. Family Guy first aired on January 31st, 1999. Now that alone isn't surprising. Most fans know that. But what most fans don't know is how close this show came to never existing at all. Seth MacFarlane, the creator, was actually scheduled to be on one of the flights that was hijacked on September 11th, 2001. His travel agent gave him the wrong departure time, which caused him to miss his flight. That flight was American Airlines Flight 11, which was the first plane to hit the World Trade Center. Now, this isn't directly connected to the creation of the show, since Family Guy already existed by that point, but it puts into perspective just how different television history could have looked. The man behind one of the most influential animated shows in history came that close to not being here at all. Let that sink in for a second. Now, let's go back to the actual origins of the show, because this is where things get really interesting. Family Guy didn't come from nowhere. It was actually based on a short animated film that Seth MacFarlane made when he was a student at the Rhode Island School of Design. The short was called The Life of Larry, and it featured a character named Larry and his talking dog Steve. Sound familiar? That foundation became the blueprint for what would eventually evolve into the Griffin family and their dog, Brian. MacFarlane shopped the idea around, and Fox took a chance on it. And when Fox takes a chance on something, they really commit, or sometimes they don't. More on that in a moment. Here's something that blows people's minds when they first hear it. Seth MacFarlane does the voices for an enormous chunk of the main cast. We're talking Peter Griffin, Stewie Griffin, Brian Griffin, and Quagmire, all coming from one person, 4 of the most distinctive and memorable animated voices in television history, all produced by the same human vocal cords. And each voice is genuinely different. Not slightly different, completely different in tone, pitch, character, and personality. Peter has that nasal Rhode Island accent. Stewie has that sophisticated British theatrical delivery. Brian sounds like a calm, measured intellectual. And Quagmire has that smooth, sleazy confidence. When you actually stop and think about the vocal range required to pull all 4 of those off in a single recording session, it's genuinely impressive. MacFarlane has said in interviews that he can switch between the voices almost instantly, which is something the recording directors at Fox found incredible when they first heard him do it. Now let's talk about the cancellation, because this is one of the most remarkable comeback stories in television history. Family Guy was canceled by Fox in 2002. Not after a short run either. The show had been going for 3 seasons and Fox pulled the plug. The ratings had been declining, the show was expensive to produce, and the network decided to cut their losses. Most shows that get canceled just fade away. The episodes stop coming, the merchandise dries up, and eventually people just move on. That's the natural life cycle of a canceled television show. But Family Guy refused to die. And the reason it came back is genuinely fascinating. DVD sales. That's the answer. When Family Guy seasons started getting released on DVD, something unexpected happened. People bought them in enormous numbers. We're talking massive sales figures that caught Fox completely off guard. The network had canceled a show thinking audiences had moved on, only to discover that millions of people were actually passionate enough about it to spend real money on the physical discs. And then Cartoon Network picked up the reruns for their Adult Swim programming block, and the ratings there were incredible. Suddenly, Fox realized they had made a significant mistake. They reversed the cancellation and brought the show back in 2005. Family Guy became one of the very few American animated series to be canceled and then successfully revived. And when it came back strong. The Season 4 premiere drew massive viewership, and the show has been running ever since. Now here's something that casual fans might not realize about how this show is actually made. The production timeline for a single episode of Family Guy is staggering. From the initial writing stage all the way through to a finished episode ready for broadcast, we're talking about an average of 9 to 10 months. Nearly a year for 22 minutes of content. The writers have to come up with the concept, break the story, write the script, get it approved, record the voice actors, send the recorded audio and storyboards to the animation studio in South Korea, receive the animated footage back, do the editing, add the music, and go through multiple rounds of revisions and adjustments before anything makes it to air. And this process is happening simultaneously for multiple episodes at once, which means the production team is always juggling a dozen different versions of the show at various stages of completion. It's a logistical operation that most viewers never think about when they're sitting on the couch watching Peter fall down the stairs for the 30th time. Let's talk about the voices some more, because there's a detail here that often gets overlooked. Mila Kunis has voiced Meg Griffin since Season 2, but in Season 1, Meg was voiced by someone else entirely, while Lacey Chabert, who you might know from Mean Girls, was the original voice of Meg Griffin. She left the role at the end of the first season due to scheduling conflicts related to her other work commitments, and Mila Kunis stepped in to take over. The transition happened between seasons, so most viewers who started watching from the beginning barely noticed the change. But if you go back and watch Season 1 episodes and then immediately jump to Season 2, you can hear the difference. Lacey Chabert's Meg sounds slightly different from Mila Kunis's Meg. It's subtle, but it's there. And Lacey Chabert has spoken publicly about leaving the role, saying there were no hard feelings and that she's glad the show found the success it did. Here's a fascinating one about Seth MacFarlane and the way he approaches the humor in the show. A lot of people assume that the cutaway gags, those random flashback sequences where the show just cuts away from the main story to show something completely unrelated, were something that evolved naturally over time. But actually, MacFarlane had that format in mind from very early in the development process. The cutaway gag was a deliberate structural choice designed to allow the show to go places that a traditional narrative couldn't. If you're telling a linear story and a character says something that reminds them of a funny incident, you can either have them tell the story verbally, which takes up dialogue time, or you can literally show the incident as if it's happening. Family Guy chose the latter, and that decision fundamentally changed the language of animated comedy. Shows that came after Family Guy have absolutely borrowed that technique, and you can see the influence in various places across modern comedy animation. Now I want to tell you something about the show's relationship with controversy, because this is genuinely interesting from a cultural perspective. Family Guy has been criticized by just about every group imaginable at some point. Religious organizations, political groups, advocacy groups, networks, critics, you name it. The Parents Television Council, which monitors content on American television, has repeatedly named Family Guy as one of the worst shows on television for families. And Seth MacFarlane has been remarkably consistent in his response to that criticism, which is essentially that the show is not designed for children, that it airs after watershed hours, and that the satire is intended to challenge and provoke thought rather than simply offend for its own sake. Whether you agree with that defense or not, the consistency of the controversy surrounding the show has actually helped it in some ways. There's a long tradition in entertainment of forbidden fruit being more appealing simply because someone told you not to consume it. Every time a watchdog group condemned Family Guy, it probably drove more curious viewers to tune in. Let me give you something that's genuinely going to surprise you. The episode Partial Terms of Endearment, which deals with surrogacy, was actually filmed and completed as part of Season 8 but was never aired on Fox in the United States. Fox refused to broadcast it. The episode eventually got released on DVD and was broadcast in the United Kingdom. But American Fox audiences never got to see it on television. Think about what that means for a second. A completed, finished episode of a major television show, fully animated, voice-acted, scored, and ready to go. Just sitting in a vault because the network decided it was too controversial to put on the air. And the show just continued without it, like it never happened. That's a remarkable situation that reveals just how much tension can exist between a creative team and the network that distributes their work. Here's one about the music. Family Guy is genuinely unusual among animated shows for the amount of original musical content it produces. The show has original songs in a significant number of episodes, and these aren't throwaway novelty tunes. Some of them are genuinely elaborate musical productions with multiple parts, harmonies, and real compositional craft behind them. Seth MacFarlane is himself a trained singer and musician, and that passion bleeds into the show in a very direct way. He's even released solo albums of classic American standards, which shows that his interest in music goes far beyond what he needs to do for the show. The Family Guy team has actually won Emmy Awards for outstanding music and lyrics on multiple occasions, which is not something that happens to shows that treat music as an afterthought. The musical numbers in Family Guy are taken seriously at every stage of production. Now, let's talk about something that connects to a much bigger cultural conversation. Family Guy has predicted or anticipated a number of real-world events in ways that are genuinely uncanny. This is something that gets shared around the internet fairly regularly, and while some of the supposed predictions are a stretch, there are a handful of genuine cases where episodes depicted situations that ended up reflecting real-life events that happened afterward. The show's writers have often addressed this by pointing out that when you produce enough content over enough years covering everything from politics to technology to culture, statistical probability alone means you're going to occasionally land on something that ends up happening in reality. But knowing the rational explanation doesn't make the moments feel any less strange when you encounter them. Let me give you a detail about the animation process that most people have never thought about. The show is written and voiced in Los Angeles, but the actual animation, the drawings, the movement, the visual comedy, is done by studios in South Korea. This is actually common practice for American animation, but the logistics are remarkable when you think about them. The American production team creates detailed storyboards and animatics that show exactly what needs to happen in every scene. These get sent overseas along with the audio recordings. The South Korean animators bring everything to life, and the finished animation gets sent back to Los Angeles for review and editing. The whole process requires incredibly precise communication across an enormous geographic distance and a significant time zone difference. When revisions need to be made, which happens regularly, the turnaround time has to be built into the production schedule in advance. It's a genuinely complex international collaboration that produces what looks on the surface like a relatively simple cartoon. Now, here's something about Seth MacFarlane's voice for Stewie that I find absolutely fascinating. The inspiration for Stewie's voice and character was rooted in a theatrical tradition. MacFarlane has cited Rex Harrison, the British stage and film actor famous for My Fair Lady, as a significant influence on how Stewie sounds. The slightly pompous, theatrically precise diction that defines Stewie's speech patterns comes from that tradition of a particular kind of mid-20th century British performance style. And when you know that, you start to hear it differently. Stewie isn't just a funny baby voice. He's a very specific cultural reference delivered through the character of an impossibly sophisticated infant. That layered quality, where there's a reference embedded inside a joke inside a character, is one of the things that separates Family Guy from simpler animated fare. Let's talk about the cast dynamic on the show, because there's something interesting happening there that goes beyond just who plays who. The main voice cast of Family Guy has been remarkably stable over the show's entire run. Seth MacFarlane, Alex Borstein, Seth Green, and Mila Kunis have all been constants, and there's a reason for that. When you have voice actors who have been playing the same characters for many years, they develop an intuitive understanding of how those characters think and speak. Seth Green, who voices Chris Griffin and also Meg in one memorable episode, has talked about how after so many years, he doesn't really have to think about how Chris sounds anymore. It's completely automatic. That kind of deep familiarity with a character produces performances that have a naturalness and consistency that you simply cannot get from new actors coming in cold. It's one of the reasons why long-running animated shows with stable casts tend to sound so cohesive. Here is something that will genuinely reframe how you think about the show's humor. A significant portion of the jokes in Family Guy are built around the assumption that you have a fairly broad base of cultural knowledge. References to old Hollywood films, classic literature, historical events, obscure musical acts, vintage television shows, and hundreds of other touchstones are woven throughout the comedy. This was a deliberate choice, and it creates an interesting layered effect where some jokes land for everyone, while other jokes only land for people who happen to share a particular reference point with the writers. When you get one of those deeper references, it feels like the show is specifically speaking to you, like the writers knew exactly who would be watching and crafted something just for that person. That feeling of being seen and understood is psychologically powerful, and it's one of the reasons why the show builds such passionate loyalty among its fans. Let me tell you about a moment in the show's history that caused a genuine wave of public reaction, unlike almost anything else Family Guy has ever done. In 2013, Family Guy aired an episode where it appeared that Brian Griffin, the family dog, was killed in a car accident and replaced with a new dog named Vinny. For a significant portion of the audience, this was devastating. Brian isn't just a side character. He's central to the emotional core of the show. He represents a certain kind of idealistic, intellectual aspiration that runs through the series. When he appeared to be gone permanently, fans were genuinely upset. There were petitions, there were articles. There was a genuine cultural conversation about the death of an animated dog. And then, a couple of episodes later, Stewie used his time machine to go back and save Brian, and everything returned to normal. Whether you view that as a clever narrative trick or as emotional manipulation, you cannot deny that it worked. The audience proved beyond any doubt just how much they cared about this character. Now, let me bring up something about the show's impact on the careers of the people involved in making it. Family Guy has served as a launching pad for a remarkable number of writers who went on to have significant careers of their own. The writing staff of Family Guy over the years has included people who went on to create or work on other major shows, films, and comedy projects. This is not unusual for a successful comedy series, but the density of talent that has passed through that writer's room is notable. In the entertainment industry, Family Guy has a reputation as a place where a certain kind of absurdist, fast-moving, pop culture literate comedy is understood and valued, which makes it attractive to writers who share that sensibility and helps explain why the quality of certain types of jokes has remained consistent even as individual writers have come and gone. Here's something about the show's setting that most people take for granted without ever really thinking about it. Quahog, Rhode Island, is a fictional city, but it's based on a real place in a very specific way. Seth MacFarlane attended the Rhode Island School of Design, and his time in New England clearly influenced both the setting of the show and certain cultural textures that run through it. The accent that Peter Griffin uses is rooted in actual New England speech patterns, and there are recurring references to Boston, Rhode Island culture, and New England life throughout the series. The choice to set the show in a fictional Rhode Island city, rather than a generic American suburb, was deliberate, and it gives Quahog a specificity that makes it feel more real than if it were set somewhere completely generic. Now here's a genuinely surprising piece of information about how long this show has actually been running. Family Guy has been on the air, counting the cancellation gap, for over 2 decades. Think about what that span of time actually means. Children who were born after the show first premiered have grown up, gone through school, and are now adults who themselves watch Family Guy. The show has outlasted entire television eras. Networks that competed with Fox in 1999 have changed dramatically. The landscape of media has been completely transformed by streaming services, social media, and a dozen other technological shifts. And through all of that, Peter Griffin is still tripping over the coffee table and hissing at his knee. There's something genuinely remarkable about that kind of longevity, especially for a show that was dead and buried for 3 years. Let me tell you something about the relationship between Family Guy and The Simpsons, because it's more complicated and interesting than most people realize. The Simpsons has been referenced in Family Guy, and the relationship between the two shows has been the subject of considerable commentary in both directions. There's a famous crossover episode that actually brought the two families together, which was a significant cultural moment for animation fans. But behind that crossover lies a longer history of tension, competition, and mutual acknowledgement between the two shows. The Simpsons purists have often been critical of Family Guy's style, arguing that the cutaway gags represent a lazier form of storytelling compared to The Simpsons' more narrative approach. Family Guy's creative team has generally been aware of and responsive to that criticism, sometimes directly addressing it within the show itself. The crossover episode, which aired in 2014, was a kind of détente between two animation giants, and the fact that it happened at all is remarkable given the complicated history between them. Here's something about the show's music that deserves more attention than it typically gets. The theme song for Family Guy, that instantly recognizable jingle that plays at the beginning of every episode, was composed by Seth MacFarlane himself, with lyrics by Walter Murphy. Walter Murphy is a fascinating figure in the show's history because he has served as the show's primary composer for its entire run, and his musical contributions go far beyond the theme. He has scored hundreds of episodes, created original songs, and helped establish the musical identity of the series. The fact that Family Guy has had this kind of musical consistency across its entire lifespan is unusual and has contributed significantly to the coherent feel of the show, even as other elements have evolved. Now, let me tell you something that will genuinely change how you watch the show going forward. There is a recurring background detail that extremely dedicated fans have noticed appearing throughout multiple episodes. Careful viewers who pay attention to things that are happening in the background of scenes, rather than just focusing on the main action, will occasionally catch small details and visual jokes that are never referenced or acknowledged by the characters. These hidden elements are part of a tradition in animation of rewarding attentive viewers with something extra. They're not crucial to understanding the episode. They're not announced or highlighted. They're just there for the people who are paying close enough attention to notice them. This kind of detail work reflects the care that goes into production, even in elements that most viewers will never consciously register. Here's one more thing I want to tell you about before we wrap up, because I think it perfectly captures what makes Family Guy a genuinely strange and fascinating cultural artifact. The show has always existed in a state of tension between two very different impulses. On one hand, it's a remarkably consistent piece of commercial entertainment that follows a reliable formula. You know roughly what you're going to get when you sit down to watch Family Guy. The characters are going to be recognizable, the jokes are going to follow certain patterns, and there's going to be a story that more or less resolves itself by the end. That consistency is part of what makes it comforting to watch. It's reliable in the way that comfort food is reliable. But on the other hand, Family Guy has repeatedly pushed into territory that no purely commercial entertainment product would go near. Controversial topics, deeply uncomfortable humor, storylines that deliberately challenge the audience's sympathies, episodes that break the fourth wall entirely and acknowledge their own status as a television show. These are the moves of a creative work that has genuine ambitions beyond just making you laugh for 22 minutes. The tension between those two impulses, the commercial and the genuinely experimental, is what gives Family Guy its distinctive energy. It's never fully one thing or the other. It's always both simultaneously, and that combination is genuinely unusual in the landscape of American television comedy. The show has won multiple Emmy Awards across various categories. It has generated spin-off series including The Cleveland Show and American Dad, which, while technically created by MacFarlane and his team as a separate project, shares DNA with Family Guy in obvious ways. The franchise that grew from that original short film Seth MacFarlane made in college has become one of the defining comedy properties in American television history. And yet, it almost didn't happen. It got canceled and brought back from the dead. It almost lost its creator to a tragedy. It had a voice actress leave before most people knew the show existed, and it had episodes locked away in vaults. It killed its most beloved character and then undid it. It made enemies and made cultural history simultaneously. Family Guy is a show that by every reasonable measure should not have survived as long as it has, produced as much content as it has, or remained as culturally relevant as it has. And yet here we are, more than 25 years after that first episode aired, and we're still talking about it, still watching it, still discovering new things about it. That's not an accident. That's the result of genuine creative passion, remarkable production dedication, an audience that cares deeply, and maybe just a little bit of luck along the way. So the next time you're watching Peter Griffin stumble through another adventure in Quahog, remember all of that. Remember the short film in a college dorm. Remember the flight that was missed. Remember the DVD sales that brought it back from the dead. Remember the voice actor doing 4 completely different characters in one room. Remember the 9 months of international production that went into those 22 minutes you're watching. There's a whole world behind that screen that most people never think about, and it's genuinely worth knowing about. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. If any of this surprised you or you want to share your own Family Guy facts that you think deserve more attention, drop them in the comments below. I read every single one, and sometimes the best stuff comes from the audience. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button because it genuinely helps this channel reach more people who love this kind of content. And if you want more deep dives into the shows, movies, and cultural moments that shaped who we are, subscribe right now because there is a lot more coming. I'll see you in the next one.
Picture this. It's 2 in the morning. You're tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. Your mind is racing with thoughts about tomorrow's responsibilities, that awkward conversation from 3 weeks ago, and whether you left the stove on. What you need isn't another meditation app or white noise machine. You need something perfectly mundane, yet oddly fascinating. You need random Family Guy facts that will occupy just enough of your brain to let sleep creep in without being so exciting that they keep you awake. Tonight we're diving into the wonderfully weird world of Quahog, with facts so specific and delightfully pointless that they'll have you drifting off faster than Peter Griffin at a feminist poetry reading. Let's start with something that sounds completely made up but is absolutely real. The chicken fights between Peter Griffin and Ernie the Giant Chicken have collectively lasted over 20 minutes of screen time across all episodes. 20 minutes. That's longer than most sitcom episodes dedicate to their main plot. These epic battles began over something so ridiculously petty that it perfectly encapsulates the show's absurdist humor. An expired coupon. Not a life-changing amount of money, not a family heirloom, but a piece of paper that saves you maybe 50 cents on chicken feed. Yet this trivial dispute has spawned some of the most elaborate and destructive fight sequences in television history. The creators didn't plan for these fights to become a recurring element. The first chicken fight was supposed to be a one-off gag, but audience response was so positive that it became a signature element of the show. Each subsequent battle had to top the previous one in terms of scope and destruction. They've fought in the streets, crashed through buildings, battled in the sky, and even taken their conflict underwater. The animators spend weeks choreographing these sequences, treating them with the same attention to detail that major studios reserve for blockbuster action films. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's production process. Every episode of Family Guy requires approximately 15,000 individual drawings. In the digital age, this seems almost quaint, but the show maintains a hand-drawn aesthetic that demands incredible attention to detail. Each character's movement, each facial expression, each background element starts as a pencil sketch. The animators have developed shortcuts and techniques over the years, but the fundamental process remains surprisingly labor-intensive. The voice actors record their lines before any animation begins, which means the animators have to match the drawings to the vocal performances rather than the other way around. This creates some interesting challenges. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple characters, and he often has conversations with himself during recording sessions. The sound engineers have become experts at seamlessly blending these multi-character performances, creating the illusion that Peter, Brian, and Stewie are actually in the same room talking to each other. Speaking of voices, here's a fact that demonstrates just how integral Seth MacFarlane is to the show's DNA. He voices 4 main characters, plus dozens of recurring characters and one-off personalities. When he temporarily stepped back from the show to focus on other projects, the producers seriously considered ending Family Guy rather than recasting his roles. They eventually found ways to work around his reduced availability, but it highlighted how deeply connected the show is to MacFarlane's specific vocal talents and comedic sensibilities. The show's relationship with censorship has produced some genuinely bizarre situations over the years. There are jokes that were cut from the television broadcast but restored for DVD releases, creating alternate versions of episodes that exist in different formats. Some episodes have different running times, depending on where and how you watch them. The censors have made requests that seem arbitrary to outside observers. Violence is often acceptable, but certain types of language or visual gags get flagged for removal. This has led to some creative workarounds by the writing team. They've developed a sort of code for getting controversial material past the censors. Sometimes they'll include an extremely offensive joke that they know will be rejected, making their actually intended joke seem mild by comparison. It's a psychological negotiation tactic that has become part of their standard writing process. Here's something that sounds like trivia, but actually reveals something profound about how the show is made. The writer's room keeps a collection of rejected joke ideas that they call the too weird pile. These aren't jokes that are too offensive or inappropriate, but rather concepts that are so strange or specific that they don't fit into any episode. Occasionally, they'll build an entire storyline around one of these orphaned ideas, which explains why some episodes feel like fever dreams that shouldn't work but somehow do. The show's approach to celebrity cameos is more strategic than it might appear. When famous people appear as themselves, they're usually playing exaggerated versions of their public personas rather than trying to seem likable or relatable. The writers deliberately lean into whatever characteristic or controversy that celebrity is known for, creating appearances that feel more like roasts than typical guest spots. This approach has occasionally caused problems when celebrities change their minds about how they want to be portrayed, leading to last-minute script changes or even canceled episodes. Family Guy's relationship with its own continuity is fascinatingly inconsistent. The writers will sometimes reference events from episodes that aired years earlier, demonstrating that they do pay attention to their own history. But they'll just as often completely ignore or contradict previously established facts about the characters or their world. This isn't laziness or poor planning. but rather a deliberate choice to prioritize individual episode quality over series-long consistency. The animation team has developed a visual shorthand for different types of scenes that regular viewers might not consciously notice but definitely feel. Flashback sequences use slightly different color palettes and animation techniques. Dream sequences have their own visual language. Even the way characters move changes depending on whether a scene is meant to be realistic or cartoonish within the show's already cartoonish world. Here's a production detail that reveals how much thought goes into seemingly throwaway moments. Background characters in crowd scenes aren't just randomly generated. The animators create specific individuals with their own implied backstories, even though these characters might only appear for a few seconds. They've developed a whole population of Quahog residents who appear in multiple episodes, creating an illusion of a lived-in community, even though most viewers would never consciously recognize these recurring background players. The show's musical numbers require a completely different production pipeline from regular episodes. They start with Seth MacFarlane or other musically inclined staff members creating rough recordings of the songs. Then professional arrangers develop full orchestrations. The voice actors record their vocals to these arrangements. Only after all the music is complete do the animators begin creating visuals to match. This process can take months for a single musical sequence, which explains why these segments often feel more polished and elaborate than the surrounding episode. Family Guy's approach to holiday episodes reveals something interesting about how the writers view their own show. They treat holiday specials as opportunities to experiment with different formats or storytelling techniques. Rather than simply plugging their characters into traditional holiday scenarios, Christmas episodes might be musicals, Halloween episodes might be horror parodies, and so on. This keeps the show from falling into the predictable patterns that plague many long-running series. The show's merchandise presents some unique challenges because of how the characters are designed. Peter Griffin's proportions don't translate well to three-dimensional objects, leading to action figures and toys that look subtly wrong. The merchandising team has had to develop modified character designs specifically for products, creating versions of the characters that maintain their essential appearance while being more practically manufacturable. Here's something that demonstrates the show's attention to detail in unexpected areas. The writers have created complete backstories for characters who have never appeared on screen. They know the names and personalities of Brian's parents, even though this information has never been relevant to any episode. They've developed detailed histories for minor recurring characters that extend far beyond anything that's ever been shown. This background work helps maintain consistency in how these characters behave, even when they're only making brief appearances. The show's relationship with its own spin-offs created some interesting continuity challenges. When the Cleveland show was in production, storylines had to be coordinated between writing teams to ensure that Cleveland's appearances on Family Guy didn't contradict what was happening on his own show. This led to some awkward scheduling situations where episodes had to be rewritten or delayed to maintain consistency across both series. Family Guy's approach to celebrity deaths has evolved over the years in response to changing cultural sensitivities. Early episodes would sometimes include jokes about recently deceased public figures, but the writers now generally avoid this territory. Unless enough time has passed for such references to feel like historical commentary rather than current events humor. This self-imposed guideline has prevented some potentially awkward situations where episodes would have aired shortly after unexpected celebrity deaths. The show's animators have developed specialized techniques for different types of scenes that regular viewers probably don't notice but contribute to the overall viewing experience. Fight scenes use different frame rates and animation principles than dialogue scenes. Fantasy sequences might employ completely different artistic styles. The animators treat each type of scene as requiring its own approach, making Family Guy more visually diverse than many people realize. Here's a fact that illustrates how deeply the show has embedded itself in popular culture. The writers receive hundreds of suggestions from fans every week, ranging from episode ideas to character suggestions to complaints about plot inconsistencies. While they can't use fan-submitted ideas for legal reasons, these communications help them understand how their audience perceives the show and what elements are most popular or problematic. The show's approach to social media and internet culture has changed dramatically over its run. Early episodes barely acknowledged the existence of the internet, while recent seasons treat social media and online culture as fundamental aspects of modern life. The writers have had to learn new forms of humor and reference that didn't exist when the show began, essentially evolving their comedy style to match changing technology and communication patterns. Family Guy's international versions present fascinating translation challenges. Jokes that rely on American cultural references or wordplay often can't be directly translated, leading to completely different jokes in dubbed versions. Some countries have created culturally specific versions of certain episodes, replacing American references with local equivalents. This has resulted in versions of Family Guy that are almost entirely different shows while maintaining the same basic characters and plot lines. The show's writers maintain detailed style guides that specify how each character speaks, what types of references they would make, and how they would react in different situations. These guides help maintain consistency across different writers and ensure that characters don't drift too far from their established personalities. Brian's dialogue, for example, follows specific patterns that reflect his pretentious intellectual aspirations, while Chris's speech patterns reflect his slower mental processing speed. Here's something that reveals the show's commitment to its own absurdist logic. The writers have created internal rules for how the show's universe works that they follow even when these rules are never explicitly stated. They know how long it takes to travel between different locations in Quahog, which characters know each other, and what each character's financial situation is like. This background consistency helps ground even the most ridiculous storylines in something resembling reality. The show's merchandise licensing deals have created some genuinely strange products over the years. There have been Family Guy-themed everything from breakfast cereals to car accessories to wedding decorations. The licensing team has to consider whether each potential product fits with the show's brand, leading to some philosophical discussions about what Family Guy represents as a cultural entity beyond just a television program. Family Guy's approach to controversial topics has become more sophisticated over the years, moving from simple shock value toward more nuanced satirical commentary. The writers now spend considerable time researching topics before writing about them, ensuring that their jokes come from a place of understanding rather than ignorance. This doesn't mean they avoid controversial subjects, but rather that they approach them with more intentionality. The show's animators have developed a visual signature that makes Family Guy immediately recognizable, even in brief clips or promotional materials. This involves not just character design but also choices about color palettes, camera angles, and motion principles. New animators joining the team have to learn these specific techniques to ensure visual consistency across different episodes and seasons. Here's a production detail that most viewers would never think about, but significantly impacts the viewing experience. The show's sound design team creates distinct audio signatures for different characters and locations. Peter's footsteps sound different from Brian's. The Griffin house has its own acoustic characteristics, and even the way doors close varies depending on the context. These subtle audio cues help create the illusion of a consistent physical world, even though everything is animated. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, animators are drawing the next batch of Family Guy episodes, voice actors are recording dialogue for situations that don't exist, and writers are debating whether jokes about topics you've never considered are funny enough to include in a television show. The machinery of entertainment continues turning even while you rest, creating the content that will occupy your mind during tomorrow night's journey toward sleep. Sweet dreams. And remember that in the grand scheme of things, we're all just characters in someone else's animated universe, trying to make sense of the absurd situations we find ourselves in. Hey there, night owls and Family Guy fanatics. If you're settling in for some sleep but your brain is still buzzing, you've clicked on the perfect video. Tonight we're diving deep into the wonderfully weird world of Quahog, with some absolutely wild Family Guy facts that'll either lull you to sleep or keep you awake, pondering the bizarre genius of Seth MacFarlane's creation. Picture this scenario. You're lying in bed, eyes getting heavy, but your mind keeps wandering. Maybe you're thinking about that awkward conversation you had at work, or wondering why you ate that entire bag of chips for dinner. Well, forget all that mundane stuff because we're about to embark on a journey through 20 years of Family Guy madness that's guaranteed to give your brain something much more entertaining to chew on. Let's start with something that might surprise you about the show's origins. When Seth MacFarlane first pitched Family Guy, he was just 24 years old and working at Hanna-Barbera. The network executives were so impressed with his 15-minute pilot that they ordered the series on the spot. But here's the kicker. MacFarlane had never actually run a television show before. He was essentially handed the keys to a multi-million-dollar production with zero experience as a showrunner. Talk about fake it till you make it. Speaking of MacFarlane, did you know he was supposed to be on one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center on September 11th? He had a ticket for American Airlines Flight 11, but overslept after a night of drinking and missed the flight by just 10 minutes. When he arrived at the airport and learned what had happened, he realized how close he'd come to never creating the Griffin family we know and love today. It's one of those sliding door moments that makes you think about how different pop culture would be if he'd caught that flight. Now let's talk about Brian Griffin, the family's intellectual dog who walks on two legs and drives a Prius. Brian's character was actually inspired by MacFarlane's own dog, also named Brian, who passed away in the early 2000s. The real Brian was a white Labrador retriever, and MacFarlane has said that losing him was one of the most difficult experiences of his life. When the show temporarily killed off cartoon Brian in 2013, the fan backlash was so intense that MacFarlane received death threats. People were legitimately angry about a fictional dog's death, which says something about how attached viewers had become to these animated characters. The temporary death of Brian actually serves as a perfect example of how deeply fans connect with Family Guy's characters, even though they're supposed to be parodies and caricatures. When Brian was hit by a car and replaced by a new dog named Vinny, voiced by Tony Sirico from The Sopranos, social media exploded with outrage. There were online petitions, angry tweets, and even real-world protests. The writers had planned to bring Brian back all along. It was meant to be a multi-episode arc exploring how the family would cope with loss, but the reaction was so overwhelmingly negative that they cut the storyline short and resurrected Brian after just 2 episodes. Here's something that might blow your mind about the show's production process. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 10 months to create, from start to finish. That means when you're watching a new episode that just aired, the writers were working on the initial script almost a year ago. This long production timeline sometimes creates weird situations where the show references current events that are no longer current by the time the episode airs, or misses major cultural moments entirely because they couldn't pivot quickly enough. The cutaway gags that Family Guy is famous for were actually born out of necessity rather than creative choice. In the early seasons, episodes would often run short, and the writers needed quick ways to fill time. These random flashbacks and non-sequitur scenes were easy to animate and didn't require complex storytelling or character development. What started as a time-filling technique became the show's signature storytelling device, copied by countless other animated series. Let's dive into some character-specific weirdness. Stewie Griffin's distinctive football-shaped head wasn't originally intended to be football-shaped at all. MacFarlane has said that Stewie's head design was meant to evoke a more oval, egg-like shape that would make him look unnatural and slightly alien. The football comparison only came up after the character was already established, and now it's impossible to unsee. Stewie's sexuality has been a topic of debate among fans for years, but MacFarlane has given conflicting answers about whether the baby is gay, straight, or something else entirely. In some interviews, he suggested that Stewie is gay, while in others, he said the character is too young for sexual orientation to be relevant. The ambiguity seems to be intentional, allowing viewers to interpret the character however they want while keeping the writers free to take Stewie in any direction the story demands. Peter Griffin's voice is actually just Seth MacFarlane doing an impression of a security guard he knew growing up in Connecticut. The guard worked at the animation studio where MacFarlane interned during college, and he would do this exaggerated New England accent that MacFarlane found hilarious. Years later, when he needed a voice for Peter, he remembered that security guard and based the entire character's speech pattern on him. The show's relationship with censorship has always been complicated and fascinating. While Family Guy pushes boundaries constantly, there are still certain words and topics that are completely off-limits for broadcast television. The writers have developed an entire arsenal of creative workarounds, using sound effects, cutaways, and strategic editing to suggest things they can't show explicitly. Sometimes the censored version is actually funnier than what they originally wrote because the restrictions force them to be more creative. Cleveland Brown's spin-off series, The Cleveland Show, was actually planned before Family Guy was even renewed for its 4th season. MacFarlane and the writers knew they wanted to explore Cleveland's character more deeply, but they weren't sure Family Guy would survive long enough to make it happen. When the show came back from cancellation stronger than ever, they were able to move forward with Cleveland's solo series, though it only lasted 4 seasons before Cleveland returned to Quahog. The character of Meg Griffin has gone through more voice actress changes than any other main character on the show. Lacey Chabert voiced Meg for the first season and part of the second, but left due to scheduling conflicts with her film career. Mila Kunis took over the role and has been playing Meg ever since, but many fans still don't realize there was ever a different voice actress. Interestingly, Kunis was only 15 when she started voicing Meg, making her younger than the character she was playing. Family Guy's cancellation and resurrection story is one of the most unusual in television history. The show was canceled after just 3 seasons due to low ratings, but DVD sales and syndication reruns on Adult Swim introduced it to a whole new audience. The ratings for the reruns were actually higher than the ratings for new episodes had been when the show first aired. This success convinced Fox to bring the show back, making Family Guy the first canceled series to be revived purely based on DVD sales and cable reruns. The show's animation style has evolved significantly over the years, though casual viewers might not notice the changes. Early episodes were animated using traditional cell animation techniques, while current episodes are created entirely using digital animation software. The digital process allows for more complex visual effects and faster production times, but some longtime fans argue that the hand-drawn episodes had a warmer, more organic feel. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's writing process. Despite Family Guy's reputation for random stream-of-consciousness humor, every single cutaway gag and non-sequitur moment is carefully planned and scripted. The writers spend weeks crafting these seemingly spontaneous moments, testing them with focus groups and refining them until they hit just the right note of absurdity. What feels effortlessly random is actually the result of meticulous preparation and timing. The character of Quagmire was originally going to be named Quahog, after the town where the Griffins live. But the writers realized that having a character and a location with the same name would be confusing for viewers, so they changed it to Quagmire at the last minute. The name Quagmire is actually a play on words, combining the idea of being stuck in a difficult situation with the character's, shall we say, adventurous romantic life. Death, the Grim Reaper character who occasionally appears on the show, was voiced by Norm Macdonald in his early appearances. Macdonald's deadpan delivery was perfect for the role, but scheduling conflicts meant he couldn't continue voicing the character regularly. Adam Carolla took over the role for several episodes before it eventually went to other voice actors. Death's inconsistent voice casting reflects one of the challenges of using celebrity guest stars for recurring characters. The show has featured some truly bizarre celebrity cameos over the years, but one of the strangest was Rush Limbaugh playing himself in an episode where Brian becomes conservative. Limbaugh recorded his lines during a commercial break of his radio show, and the writers had to work around his limited availability by keeping his dialogue minimal and straightforward. The episode aired during the height of Limbaugh's popularity, and his appearance generated significant media attention. Family Guy's approach to continuity is deliberately inconsistent, which allows the writers tremendous creative freedom, but sometimes confuses viewers who are paying close attention. Characters die and come back to life. Major events happen and are never mentioned again. And the timeline of the show makes absolutely no sense if you try to analyze it logically. This isn't accidental. The writers have explicitly said they prioritize individual episode quality over long-term story coherence. The show's merchandising success has been almost as impressive as its television ratings. Family Guy merchandise has generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, with everything from t-shirts and coffee mugs to video games and board games. The talking plush toys of Stewie and Brian were particularly popular, though they had to be carefully programmed to avoid saying anything too inappropriate for younger children who might play with them. One of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy's production is how they handle controversial episodes. The writers have an informal rating system for how potentially offensive each episode might be, and they adjust the marketing and promotion accordingly. Episodes that push boundaries harder than usual often air with less advanced publicity, allowing them to reach audiences without generating pre-broadcast controversy that might lead to censorship. The show's relationship with Fox Network executives has been notoriously rocky over the years. MacFarlane has been vocal about his frustrations with network interference, and several episodes have included not-so-subtle jabs at Fox's programming decisions and corporate culture. Despite this tension, Family Guy remains one of Fox's most valuable properties, giving MacFarlane significant leverage in creative disputes. Here's a production detail that most viewers never think about, but affects every single episode. The timing of animated comedy is completely different from live-action comedy because animated characters can move and react in ways that real actors cannot. Jokes that would fall flat in live action can work perfectly in animation because the visual possibilities are unlimited. The writers and animators work closely together to ensure that the timing of visual gags matches the rhythm of the dialogue. The voice recording process for Family Guy is also unique in the animation world. Most animated shows record each actor separately, but Family Guy often brings the main cast together for group recording sessions. This allows for more natural interactions and improvisation, though it also makes the recording process more expensive and time-consuming. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple characters, so he sometimes has to have conversations with himself, switching between Peter, Brian, and Stewie within the same scene. As you're drifting off to sleep tonight, think about this final fact. Family Guy has now been on the air for over 2 decades, making it one of the longest-running animated series in television history. Kids who watched the first episode when it premiered in 1999 are now adults with children of their own. The show has outlasted multiple generations of network executives, survived cancellation, and adapted to completely different media landscapes, from broadcast television to streaming services. The Griffin family has become as familiar to many people as their own relatives, which is both impressive and slightly disturbing when you consider how dysfunctional that family actually is. But maybe that's the secret to Family Guy's enduring appeal. In a world where real families can be just as complicated and bizarre as the fictional ones we see on television, there's something comforting about knowing that no matter how weird your own family dynamics might be, at least you're not dealing with a talking baby who's constantly plotting world domination, and a dog who's writing the great American novel. Sweet dreams, and remember, life's a lot like Family Guy. Sometimes it makes perfect sense. Sometimes it's completely random, and sometimes you just have to go with it and hope for the best. Whether you're a longtime fan or a newcomer to the show, these facts give you a glimpse into the creative chaos that makes Family Guy such a unique entry in television history. Sleep well, and maybe you'll dream about Quahog tonight. You know that feeling when you're trying to fall asleep but your brain just won't shut up? Well, tonight we're gonna fix that with some of the most random, weirdly fascinating Family Guy facts that'll have you drifting off to dreamland while learning bizarre trivia about America's most chaotic animated family. So get comfortable, dim those lights, and let me take you on a gentle journey through the strange world of Quahog. Let's start with something that might surprise you. The show's creator Seth MacFarlane almost missed his flight on September 11, 2001. He was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11, one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center. But he arrived at the airport just 10 minutes late and missed the boarding. Sometimes, being late really does save your life. This near-miss experience actually influenced some of the show's later episodes, though MacFarlane rarely talks about it publicly. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, did you know he voices 4 of the main characters? Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire are all brought to life by the same person. That's pretty impressive when you think about how different each character sounds. MacFarlane developed Peter's voice by imitating a security guard he knew, while Brian's sophisticated tone was inspired by old Hollywood actors. Stewie's accent, meanwhile, was based on Rex Harrison's performance in My Fair Lady. Here's something that might help you sleep better, knowing it exists. There's an entire episode that was banned from television for years. The episode, called Partial Terms of Endearment, dealt with some pretty controversial topics and wasn't aired on Fox until much later. It eventually found its way to DVD releases, but for the longest time, fans had no idea this episode even existed. Sometimes, the most interesting content is the stuff we never get to see. Family Guy has this weird relationship with cancellation that's almost like a bedtime story in itself. The show was canceled, not once, but twice. First in 2002, then again in 2003. But here's where it gets interesting. DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim were so successful that Fox brought it back in 2005. It's like the show kept falling asleep and waking up stronger each time. The fans literally saved it through their dedication, which is pretty heartwarming when you think about it. Let me tell you about some of the guest stars who've appeared on the show that you might not have realized. Patrick Stewart, the distinguished Captain Picard himself, has voiced multiple characters including Susie's arch-nemesis. Rush Limbaugh appeared as himself, and even Phyllis Diller lent her voice to Peter's mother-in-law. The show has attracted everyone from political figures to rock stars, creating this weird mix of high culture and lowbrow humor. There's something oddly soothing about the show's animation process, too. Each episode takes about 8 months to complete from script to screen. The writers spend weeks crafting jokes, the voice actors record their lines multiple times to get the perfect delivery, and then teams of animators bring everything to life frame by frame. It's like watching a very slow, very detailed dream come together. The famous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken started as a throwaway gag, but became one of the show's most beloved running jokes. These elaborate, destruction-filled battles were inspired by old action movies and Jackie Chan films. The animators love creating these sequences because they get to go completely over the top with the destruction and mayhem. There's something almost meditative about watching these absurdly long fight scenes unfold. Here's a fact that connects to real life in an unexpected way. The character of Mayor Adam West was named after the actor who played Batman in the 1960 Seconds TV series. When the real Adam West heard about this, he was so delighted that he agreed to voice the character himself. He continued playing the role until his death in 2017, bringing his own quirky charm to the already eccentric animated mayor of Quahog. The show's musical numbers are surprisingly complex productions. When they create songs like Surfin' Bird or any of their elaborate Broadway-style numbers, they work with professional musicians and composers. Seth MacFarlane, being a trained singer himself, often performs these songs live in recording sessions. The musical episodes require months of additional work, but they've become some of the most memorable moments in the series. Cleveland's spin-off show, The Cleveland Show, ran for 4 seasons and had its own unique animation style that was slightly more polished than the original Family Guy. When Cleveland returned to Family Guy, the animators had to readjust his character design to match the original show's style. It's like he went away, got a makeover, and had to tone it down when he came back home. The show's pop culture references are researched extensively by a team of writers who specialize in different decades and cultural phenomena. They maintain databases of movie quotes, TV show references, and historical events to ensure their parodies are accurate enough to be funny, but absurd enough to avoid copyright issues. Sometimes they spend weeks perfecting a single throwaway reference that appears for just a few seconds. Stewie's sexuality has been a running mystery throughout the series, with writers deliberately keeping it ambiguous. Seth MacFarlane has mentioned in interviews that Stewie's character is meant to be fluid and open to interpretation. This ambiguity has led to countless fan theories and discussions, making Stewie one of the most analyzed characters in animated television. The Griffin house interior has been redesigned multiple times throughout the series, but the exterior has remained remarkably consistent. The house is supposedly located on Spooner Street in Quahog, Rhode Island, and the address is 31 Spooner Street. Fans have actually tried to locate this address in real Rhode Island towns, though of course it doesn't exist. Voice actress Alex Borstein, who plays Lois, originally auditioned for a completely different role. She was supposed to voice a minor character, but when they heard her natural speaking voice, they immediately knew she was perfect for Lois. Borstein has mentioned that she sometimes forgets to use Lois's voice in real life and accidentally slips into character during casual conversations. The show's writer's room operates like a comedy laboratory, where jokes are tested, refined, and sometimes completely scrapped. They have a policy where any writer can suggest changes to any joke, no matter how senior or junior they are. This collaborative approach has led to some of the show's most unexpected and brilliant moments. But it also means that some episodes go through dozens of script revisions. Brian's character was almost completely different in the original concept. He was supposed to be a regular dog who couldn't talk, but MacFarlane decided that having an intellectual talking dog would create better story opportunities. This decision fundamentally changed the show's dynamic and gave them a character who could serve as both comic relief and philosophical commentary. The infamous Conway Twitty segments, where the show would cut to footage of the real country singer performing entire songs, were actually created as time fillers when episodes ran short. These segments became so popular with fans that the writers started including them intentionally, turning what was essentially animated dead air into a beloved recurring gag. Quagmire's character was inspired by radio DJs from the 1950 seconds and 1960 seconds who had that smooth, slightly sleazy on-air personality. Seth MacFarlane studied old radio shows and interviews to develop Quagmire's distinctive speaking style and his catchphrase, "giggity giggity." The character's appearance was based on classic cartoon characters, but with a modern twist that made him both nostalgic and contemporary. The show's relationship with censorship is fascinating. The writers often create jokes specifically designed to test the boundaries of what they can get away with on television. They'll write multiple versions of controversial scenes, knowing that some will be cut but hoping that the milder versions will make it to air. It's like an ongoing negotiation with the censors through comedy. Family Guy was one of the first animated shows to embrace internet culture and memes before most people knew what memes were. The writers were early adopters of online humor and would incorporate internet jokes into episodes months before they became mainstream. This forward-thinking approach helped keep the show relevant to younger audiences who were spending more time online. The character of Herbert the Pervert was originally supposed to appear in just one episode, but his distinctive voice and creepy personality made him an unexpected fan favorite. The voice actor Alex Borstein came up with Herbert's characteristic whistle and speech pattern on the spot during recording, and it became such an integral part of the character that they couldn't imagine him any other way. Did you know that several Family Guy episodes have been turned into actual comic books? These comics expand on storylines from the show and sometimes feature adventures that would be too expensive to animate. The comic book format allows the writers to explore more complex storylines and include visual gags that might not work as well in animation. The show's approach to celebrity deaths is uniquely irreverent. When famous people pass away, the writers often create memorial segments that are simultaneously respectful and absurd. They've developed a reputation for handling these situations with a mix of genuine tribute and satirical commentary that somehow works better than it should. Joe Swanson's character was created specifically to address representation of disabled characters in animation, but the writers were careful not to make his disability the only thing that defines him. They wanted to show that wheelchair users could be action heroes, fathers, and complex characters with their own storylines and personality quirks that had nothing to do with their physical limitations. The show's animation studio has created detailed model sheets for background characters who appear for just a few seconds. They believe that consistency in character design, even for minor roles, helps create a more believable world. Some of these background characters have their own names and backstories that never make it into episodes, but help the animators understand their roles in Quahog's community. Family Guy's impact on internet culture extends beyond just memes and references. The show pioneered the use of cutaway gags, which became a template for online content creators who needed to create short, punchy comedy segments. Many YouTube comedians cite Family Guy's editing style as an influence on their own work. The series has been translated into dozens of languages, and each version faces unique challenges in adapting American cultural references for international audiences. In some countries, entire storylines have been changed to make them more culturally relevant, while maintaining the show's essential humor and character dynamics. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that Family Guy represents something uniquely American about comedy: the ability to find humor in absolutely everything, from the mundane details of suburban life to the biggest questions about existence and meaning. The show's creators understood that laughter can be found anywhere if you're willing to look for it, and sometimes the most random, unexpected moments become the ones we remember most fondly. Sweet dreams, and may your own family adventures be slightly less chaotic than the Griffins. Ever find yourself tossing and turning at night, your brain buzzing with random thoughts? Well, tonight we're diving into something that'll either put you right to sleep or keep you awake with fascinating tidbits about one of television's most controversial animated families. Get comfortable, dim those lights, and let me share some incredibly random Family Guy facts that'll drift through your mind like counting sheep. Picture this. It's 1999, and television is about to change forever. A brand new animated show is about to premiere that would become one of the most talked about series in entertainment history. But here's something most people don't know. Family Guy almost never happened at all. The pilot episode was actually rejected multiple times before finally getting picked up. Seth MacFarlane had to fight tooth and nail just to get his vision on screen, and even then, the network executives weren't entirely convinced it would work. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, here's a mind-blowing fact that might surprise you. He was originally supposed to be on one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001. He had a ticket for American Airlines Flight 11, but he missed the flight because he was hungover from a party the night before, and his travel agent had given him the wrong departure time. That hangover quite literally saved his life and allowed him to continue creating the show we know today. It's one of those sliding door moments that makes you think about how different television history could have been. Now, let's talk about something that'll really mess with your head. You know Brian Griffin, the intellectual talking dog? Well, his character was almost completely different. In the original concept, Brian was going to be much more dog-like, basically just a regular pet who occasionally made witty observations. But MacFarlane decided to make him more human-like because he wanted a character who could serve as the voice of reason in the Quapling, chaotic Griffin household. This decision fundamentally changed the entire dynamic of the show. Here's another random tidbit that might drift you off to dreamland. The famous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the giant chicken weren't originally planned to become recurring segments. The first chicken fight was just supposed to be a one-off gag in Season 2. But the animators had so much fun creating the elaborate fight sequence that they decided to bring it back again and again. These fights became so popular that they're now considered one of the show's signature elements, even though they started as basically an inside joke among the production team. You know those cutaway gags that Family Guy is famous for? The ones that start with, "This is worse than that time when," or "Remember when?" Well, here's something fascinating about how they came to be. MacFarlane got the idea from old variety shows and comedy sketches he watched as a kid. He wanted to create something that felt like channel surfing, where you'd suddenly jump to a completely different scene or time period without warning. The writing team actually keeps a massive database of potential cutaway gags, and they have hundreds of unused ideas just sitting there waiting for the right episode. Let me tell you about something that happened during the show's darkest period. When Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after just 3 seasons, something unprecedented occurred. The show's reruns on Adult Swim became so popular that they actually brought in higher ratings than most news shows on primetime television. This had never happened before in television history. A canceled show was literally outperforming current programming just through reruns. The DVD sales were breaking records too, which ultimately convinced Fox to bring the show back from the dead. This revival made Family Guy one of the first major television shows to be brought back purely because of fan demand and aftermarket success. It changed how networks think about canceled shows and basically created the template for how fan campaigns could save their favorite programs. Pretty remarkable when you think about how social media wasn't even a factor back then. This was all done through word of mouth, online forums, and DVD purchases. Here's a random fact about Stewie Griffin that might surprise you. His distinctive football-shaped head wasn't originally designed that way. The early character sketches showed him with a more traditionally round baby head. But MacFarlane kept adjusting the proportions, making the head more and more elongated because he thought it made Stewie look more sinister and alien-like. The final design was actually inspired by the shape of a rugby ball, which MacFarlane thought gave Stewie a more intellectual, almost extraterrestrial appearance. Speaking of Stewie, his accent is another interesting story. MacFarlane originally performed the character with a standard American accent, but during recording sessions, he started experimenting with different voices. The posh British accent that became Stewie's trademark was actually inspired by Rex Harrison's performance as Professor Higgins in My Fair Lady. MacFarlane thought the sophisticated accent would create a funny contrast with Stewie being just a baby, and it became one of the character's most distinctive features. Now here's something that'll really blow your mind about the show's production process. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 8 to 10 months to complete from start to finish. That means the episodes you're watching tonight were actually being worked on almost a year ago. The animation process is incredibly complex, with each episode requiring hundreds of individual drawings and countless hours of voice work, sound design, and editing. It's like a massive assembly line that never stops moving. The voice acting sessions are pretty fascinating too. Unlike many animated shows where actors record their Borges lines separately, the Family Guy cast often records together in the same room. This creates more natural conversations and allows the actors to play off each other's energy. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 main characters, Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Quagmire, and he often has to have conversations with himself, switching between voices mid-sentence. The other actors say it's both impressive and slightly disturbing to watch. Here's a random detail about the show's animation style. The characters are deliberately drawn with simple, clean lines because MacFarlane wanted them to be easy to animate quickly. This was partly a practical decision. More complex designs would have made production much more expensive and time-consuming. But it also gave the show a distinctive look that set it apart from more detailed animations like The Simpsons. The simplicity actually became part of the show's charm. Let's talk about something that happened behind the scenes during the show's peak years. The writing room had a very specific creative process that sounds almost ritualistic. Every morning, the writers would gather and pitch random ideas, no matter how weird or nonsensical they seemed. These brainstorming sessions could last for hours, with writers building on each other's ideas and creating increasingly elaborate scenarios. Many of the show's most memorable moments came from these spontaneous creative explosions. Here's something about the show's cultural impact that's pretty remarkable. Family Guy has been translated into dozens of languages and airs in over 100 countries worldwide. But here's the interesting part. Different countries have different censorship standards, so episodes are often edited differently depending on where they're broadcast. Some countries remove certain religious references, others cut violent scenes, and some even change dialogue to make cultural references more relevant to local audiences. The merchandising aspect of Family Guy is another fascinating rabbit hole. The show has spawned everything from action figures to breakfast cereals to mobile games, but one of the most successful merchandise lines has been the talking Stewie dolls, which were initially rejected by toy companies because they thought parents wouldn't want their children playing with a toy that made sarcastic and sometimes inappropriate comments. When they finally got produced, they became one of the best-selling animated character toys of the early 2000s. Let's drift into some trivia about the show's music. Family Guy features more original songs than most animated series, and many of them have become surprisingly popular. The song Shapoopy from the episode Mission Impossible actually led to increased sales of the original 1,957 Broadway recording. Seth MacFarlane's love of classic American standards heavily influences the show's musical choices, and he often uses the characters to perform songs from the Great American Songbook. Here's something that might help you fall asleep. The show's approach to continuity is intentionally loose and dreamlike. Unlike shows that maintain strict chronological order and character development, Family Guy treats each episode almost like a separate universe. Characters die and come back, relationships reset, and events from previous episodes are often ignored completely. This was a deliberate creative choice to give writers maximum freedom to tell whatever story they wanted without being constrained by what happened before. The show's relationship with controversy has always been complex and evolving. What started as boundary-pushing humor that felt fresh and daring gradually shifted over the years, sometimes crossing lines that made even longtime fans uncomfortable. The writers have acknowledged this evolution, often using the show itself to comment on its own controversial moments. It's like the show became self-aware of its own reputation and started having conversations with its critics through the episodes themselves. As we drift toward the end of our random fact journey, here's something particularly interesting about Family Guy's place in animation history. The show arrived at a perfect moment when adult animation was just beginning to find its footing as a legitimate television genre. The Simpsons had proven that cartoons could be sophisticated and satirical, South Park had shown they could be provocative and current, and Family Guy carved out its own niche by being rapid-fire and referential in ways that felt uniquely modern. The show's influence on internet culture cannot be overstated. Long before social media memes became a cultural phenomenon, Family Guy was creating bite-sized moments of humor that people would quote and reference online. The cutaway gags, in particular, felt perfectly suited to the short attention spans and random humor that would later dominate platforms like YouTube and TikTok. In many ways, Family Guy predicted the kind of humor that would thrive in the digital age. So, as you settle into sleep tonight, remember that Family Guy represents something larger than just an animated sitcom. It's a cultural artifact that captured a specific moment in entertainment history. When television was becoming more experimental, audiences were hungry for edgier content, and creators were learning to navigate the balance between pushing boundaries and maintaining mass appeal. The show's journey from cancellation to revival to cultural phenomenon mirrors the changing landscape of television itself. Sweet dreams, and may your sleep be filled with random cutaway gags and the gentle sound of Peter Griffin's distinctive laugh echoing through your subconscious. These random facts about Family Guy have hopefully given your mind something to wander through as you drift off, proving that even animated chaos can become oddly soothing when filtered through the lens of curiosity and nostalgia. Picture this. You're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone at 2 in the morning, and suddenly you're wondering about the most random Family Guy trivia that exists. Well, you've come to the right place, because tonight we're diving deep into the weirdest, most fascinating, and downright bizarre facts about everyone's favorite dysfunctional animated family, from secret voice actor connections to hidden Easter eggs that took fans decades to discover. These facts will blow your mind and give you plenty to think about as you drift off to sleep. Let's start with something that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about Peter Griffin's voice. Did you know that Seth MacFarlane actually based Peter's distinctive voice on a security guard he met while working at Hanna-Barbera? The guard had this thick New England accent that MacFarlane found absolutely hilarious, so he started imitating it during production meetings. What's even crazier is that this security guard had no idea he was the inspiration for one of television's most iconic cartoon characters, until years later when a coworker pointed it out to him. Imagine finding out that your voice became the foundation for a character watched by millions of people worldwide. Speaking of voices, here's something that might surprise you about Meg Griffin. Originally, Lacey Shaybird voiced Meg during the first season and part of the second season. But when she left to pursue other projects, Mila Kunis stepped in without anyone really noticing. The transition was so seamless that many longtime fans still don't realize there was ever a voice change. What makes this even more interesting is that Mila Kunis was initially hesitant to take the role because she felt bad about replacing another actress. Little did she know, she'd be voicing Meg for over 2 decades. Now let's talk about Stewie Griffin's accent, because there's a fascinating story behind that sophisticated British tone. Seth MacFarlane has revealed that Stewie's voice is actually inspired by Rex Harrison, the actor who played Professor Henry Higgins in the musical My Fair Lady. But here's the twist that most people don't know. MacFarlane originally wanted Stewie to gradually lose his accent as he got older, showing his American upbringing taking over. However, fans loved the accent so much that the creators decided to keep it permanently. This means Stewie's voice was supposed to be a temporary character trait that ended up becoming his most defining feature. Brian Griffin's character has one of the most unusual origin stories in animated television. Originally, Brian was going to be just a regular dog who couldn't talk. Seth MacFarlane only gave him the ability to speak because he needed a character who could serve as the voice of reason in the Griffin household. But here's what's really wild. Brian's personality is largely based on MacFarlane's own political views and personal struggles with alcoholism. In many ways, Brian serves as MacFarlane's animated alter ego, which explains why the character often breaks the fourth wall and seems more aware of the show's absurdity than other characters. The Griffin family's house has appeared in other Seth MacFarlane shows, but not in the way you might expect. The layout and design of the Griffin home was actually recycled and modified for use in American Dad as the Smith family residence. If you look closely at both houses, you'll notice they share remarkably similar floor plans, just with different decorations and color schemes. This was done to save time and money during production, but it created an unintentional connection between the two shows that eagle-eyed fans discovered years later. Cleveland Brown's spin-off show, The Cleveland Show, was originally supposed to be much darker in tone. The initial concept had Cleveland dealing with serious issues like racism, economic struggles, and family dysfunction in a more realistic way. However, Fox executives pushed for a lighter approach that would better match Family Guy's comedic style. This decision ultimately led to the show's cancellation after 4 seasons, as it never quite found its own identity separate from its parent series. Here's a fact that'll make you appreciate the show's attention to detail. Every single background character in Quahog has a name and backstory, even if they only appear for a few seconds. The writers maintain detailed files on hundreds of minor characters, including their occupations, family relationships, and personality traits. This level of world building is incredibly rare in animated comedies and helps explain why Quahog feels like a real town despite all its absurdities. The famous chicken fight scenes between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken weren't originally planned to become a recurring gag. The first fight scene was supposed to be a one-time joke, but the animation team had so much fun creating it that they kept extending the sequence. What was originally planned as a 30-second bit became a multi-minute epic battle that destroyed half of downtown Quahog. The positive fan reaction convinced the writers to bring back the chicken fights as a regular feature. Lois Griffin's piano playing isn't just for show. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois, is actually an accomplished pianist in real life. During recording sessions, she often plays the piano parts herself rather than having them added in post-production. This gives Lois's musical performances a more authentic feel and allows Borstein to better connect with the character during emotional scenes involving music. The show's timeline is intentionally confusing, and there's a specific reason for this creative choice. Seth MacFarlane wanted Family Guy to exist in a floating timeline where characters never age and current events can be referenced without dating the show. This means that episodes from 1999 and episodes from 2023 can both reference contemporary events as if they're happening simultaneously. It's a narrative technique borrowed from comic books, where characters like Batman have been fighting crime for decades without aging. Meg's unpopularity among her family and peers was originally supposed to be temporary. The writers planned to give her a character development arc where she eventually found her confidence and earned respect from others. However, the jokes about Meg being ignored and mistreated became so popular with audiences that the writers decided to make it a permanent aspect of her character. This decision has created one of the most consistent running gags in the show's history. The Family Guy writing room operates under a unique rule. Any writer can pitch a cutaway gag at any time, regardless of what's being discussed. This policy has led to some of the show's most memorable non-sequitur moments, including random historical events, celebrity parodies, and completely absurd scenarios. The writers keep a massive database of unused cutaway ideas that they can draw from whenever they need to fill time or add extra laughs to an episode. Here's something that might change how you watch the show. Many of the most quotable Peter Griffin lines were completely improvised by Seth MacFarlane during recording sessions. MacFarlane has a habit of going off script and trying different variations of lines until he finds something that makes the entire recording booth laugh. These spontaneous moments often end up being the most memorable parts of episodes, proving that sometimes the best comedy comes from pure improvisation. The character of Joe Swanson was created specifically to challenge stereotypes about people with disabilities. Rather than being defined by his wheelchair, Joe is portrayed as incredibly capable, often more physically impressive than his able-bodied friends. His character was inspired by real police officers and military veterans who continued serving their communities despite physical challenges. Writers worked closely with disability advocacy groups to ensure Joe's portrayal remains respectful and empowering. Family Guy holds a unique record in television history. It's the only show to be canceled twice by the same network and brought back both times due to fan demand. The first cancellation happened after the second season due to low ratings. But DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim generated such a passionate fan base that Fox decided to revive it. When it was canceled again after the third season, the fan campaign was even stronger, leading to its permanent return and eventual status as one of Fox's longest-running shows. The show's animation style deliberately mimics classic cartoons from the 1960 seconds and 1970 seconds. Seth MacFarlane grew up watching shows like The Flintstones and The Jetsons, and he wanted Family Guy to have that same timeless cartoon aesthetic. This choice means that episodes from the early 2000s don't look dated compared to more recent episodes, helping the show maintain visual consistency across more than 2 decades of production. Stewie's sexual orientation has been a subject of fan speculation for years, and Seth MacFarlane has given conflicting answers about it intentionally. MacFarlane has stated that Stewie's sexuality is meant to be ambiguous and fluid, reflecting the complexity of human identity. This decision allows the character to work in various comedic contexts, without being confined to specific stereotypes or expectations. The Griffin family dog Brian was almost replaced permanently in 2013, but the decision was reversed after just 2 episodes due to overwhelming fan backlash. The writers killed off Brian and introduced a new dog named Vinny, planning to make this change permanent. However, the negative fan reaction was so intense that they quickly brought Brian back to life and wrote Vinny out of the show. This incident demonstrated just how attached audiences had become to the original characters. Here's a production secret that few fans know. Many of Family Guy's most elaborate action sequences are animated by the same team that works on major Hollywood animated films. When the show needs complex chase scenes, fight sequences, or musical numbers, they often hire freelance animators who normally work on Disney or Pixar movies. This explains why certain Family Guy sequences have surprisingly high production values compared to typical television animation. The town of Quahog is loosely based on several real New England locations, but it's primarily inspired by Cranston, Rhode Island, where Seth MacFarlane spent time during his childhood. Many of Quahog's landmarks and businesses are based on real places that MacFarlane remembered from his youth. The Drunken Clam Bar, for example, is inspired by a combination of several actual bars in the Providence area. Cleveland's voice actor Mike Henry made the unusual decision to step down from voicing the character in 2020, stating that a black character should be voiced by a black actor. This decision led to extensive recasting and rewriting to maintain character continuity while respecting the importance of authentic representation in voice acting. The transition process involved careful collaboration between Henry, the new voice actor, and the writing team to preserve Cleveland's established personality. Family Guy episodes often contain hidden references to other Seth MacFarlane projects, including American Dad and The Orville. These Easter eggs are scattered throughout episodes in the form of background details, character names, and brief visual gags. Finding all these connections has become a hobby for dedicated fans who maintain detailed databases of cross-references between MacFarlane's various shows. The show's musical numbers are often more complex than they appear on screen. Many of the songs featured in Family Guy episodes are full-length compositions that get edited down for television. Complete versions of these songs exist and are sometimes released as bonus content or special features. The writers and composers put significant effort into creating these musical sequences, often treating them as mini-musicals within the larger episode structure. Quagmire's famous giggity catchphrase was originally supposed to be used only once as a throwaway joke. Seth MacFarlane was experimenting with different ways to express the character's perverted excitement when he stumbled upon the giggity sound. The phrase became so associated with Quagmire that it's now impossible to imagine the character without it, showing how sometimes the most memorable elements of fictional characters emerge completely by accident. The Family Guy universe contains numerous characters who have appeared across multiple episodes spanning decades, creating one of the most extensive animated fictional communities on television. Background characters like the greased-up deaf guy, the evil monkey, and various Quahog residents have their own continuing storylines and character development arcs that careful viewers can track across seasons. These random facts barely scratch the surface of Family Guy's incredibly detailed fictional world. From voice acting secrets to animation techniques, from character development decisions to production challenges, every aspect of this show has fascinating stories behind it. As you drift off to sleep tonight, you can rest easy knowing that somewhere in Quahog, the Griffin family is probably getting into another ridiculous adventure that will entertain audiences for years to come. Sweet dreams, and remember, when life gets you down, at least you're not Meg Griffin trying to fit in at James Woods High School. Picture this. You're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone at 2 a.m., when suddenly you realize something terrifying. The wholesome suburban mom from Family Guy might actually be one of television's most dangerous criminals. Tonight, We're diving deep into the bizarre, shocking, and downright unbelievable world of random Family Guy facts that'll keep your mind spinning as you drift off to sleep. Before we jump into this wild ride, let me set the stage. Family Guy has been blessing us with its chaotic humor since 1999. And over those decades, the show has accumulated more strange trivia than a conspiracy theorist's bulletin board. These aren't your typical behind-the-scenes stories about voice actors or animation techniques. No, we're talking about facts so random and unexpected that they'll have you questioning everything you thought you knew about the Griffin family and their twisted little universe. Let's start with something that'll make you see Lois Griffin in a completely different light. Did you know that if we calculated all of Lois's criminal activities throughout the series, she'd be facing multiple life sentences? I'm not talking about minor infractions here. We're discussing murder, drug manufacturing, corruption, kidnapping, and assault charges that would make even the most hardened criminals nervous. The evolution of Lois as a character is absolutely fascinating when you think about it. In the early seasons, she was essentially a generic sitcom mom, playing the straight woman to Peter's antics. But somewhere along the way, the writers decided to transform her into something far more sinister. By the later seasons, Lois had become a full-blown criminal mastermind, hiding behind the facade of suburban motherhood. Take her casual confession to vehicular manslaughter, for instance. During a seemingly innocent family moment, Lois drops the bombshell that she once killed a jaywalker years ago. The way she mentions it so nonchalantly, like she's discussing the weather, suggests this might not even be her only victim. It makes you wonder what other dark secrets are lurking behind that perfectly styled red hair. But murder is just the tip of the iceberg. Lois has also run a methamphetamine operation that would make Walter White jealous. When the Griffin family moves to a farm and discovers an abandoned meth lab in their storm cellar, most normal people would call the police immediately. Not Lois. She sees a business opportunity and jumps in with both feet, becoming a drug queenpin alongside Peter. The fact that she rationalizes this decision by saying their family needs them to sell illegal drugs to the community shows just how twisted her moral compass has become. Speaking of twisted morals, let's talk about the time Lois went through what can only be described as the world's most inappropriate midlife crisis. After Peter makes some insensitive comments about her age at her birthday party, Lois transforms into someone you might find dancing on tables at a club at 3 in the morning. This leads to her attempting to seduce a teenage pop star, which crosses so many legal and ethical boundaries that it's hard to know where to begin. The shoplifting incident is another perfect example of how quickly Lois can spiral out of control. What starts as stealing a single ham from the grocery store escalates into a full-blown crime spree involving fine art and car parts. Her kleptomania becomes so severe that she eventually gets arrested, breaks out of jail, and turns her entire family into fugitives. All because she couldn't resist the thrill of taking something that didn't belong to her. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Lois's criminal behavior is how she treats her own children when things go wrong. When Stewie suffers a serious head injury, instead of rushing him to the hospital like any normal parent would, Lois chooses to cover it up. She and Peter create an elaborate scheme involving makeup and staged accidents to hide their negligence. The fact that she prioritizes avoiding responsibility over her child's well-being reveals a level of selfishness that's genuinely chilling. Now, let's shift gears and talk about some of the more bizarre production facts that most fans don't know. The show's creator, Seth MacFarlane, originally pitched Family Guy as a much darker, more satirical series. Many of the early concepts were considered too controversial, even for late-night television. Some of these rejected ideas eventually found their way into later episodes, but in modified form. The voice acting process for Family Guy is more complex than most people realize. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple main characters, often having full conversations with himself during recording sessions. The technical challenge of maintaining distinct personalities and vocal patterns for each character while switching back and forth rapidly is something that few voice actors could handle. MacFarlane has mentioned in interviews that he sometimes loses track of which character he's supposed to be voicing mid-sentence. The show's animation style, while appearing simple on the surface, actually requires an enormous amount of detail work. Each episode contains hundreds of subtle visual gags and background jokes that most viewers miss entirely. The animators deliberately hide references to other shows, movies, and pop culture phenomena in almost every frame. Some of these hidden jokes are so obscure that they're only discovered by fans years after the episodes originally aired. One of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy's production is how the writers handle the show's timeline. The characters never age, despite the show running for over 2 decades. This creates some fascinating continuity challenges. For example, pop culture references that were current when early episodes were written now seem dated, but the characters still react to them as if they're happening in real time. The writers have to constantly balance staying relevant with maintaining the show's internal consistency. The censorship battles that Family Guy has fought over the years could fill their own documentary series. Network executives have rejected countless jokes, storylines, and visual gags for being too offensive or controversial. What's fascinating is that some of the content that was deemed unacceptable 15 years ago would probably pass without comment today, while other material that aired without issue then would never make it to broadcast now. The shifting standards of what's considered appropriate for television have forced the writers to constantly adapt their approach. Let's talk about the show's international reception, which varies wildly from country to country. In some nations, entire episodes have been banned for content that American audiences barely notice. Certain characters have been completely removed from international versions, while other episodes have been so heavily edited that they're barely recognizable. The challenge of creating content that works across different cultural contexts while maintaining the show's irreverent spirit has led to some creative solutions and some spectacular failures. The merchandise empire surrounding Family Guy is absolutely massive, but some of the products that have been created are genuinely bizarre. There have been Family Guy energy drinks, pet accessories, and even home security systems. The strangest might be the Family Guy branded medical supplies, which seems like an odd choice given the show's generally unhealthy lifestyle choices and medical mishaps. The fact that someone thought a thermometer featuring Peter Griffin was a marketable idea says something about our society that I'm not sure I want to examine too closely. Speaking of merchandise, the show's impact on internet culture cannot be overstated. Family Guy clips and memes have become a fundamental part of online humor, often taken completely out of context and used in ways the original creators never intended. Some jokes that weren't particularly funny in their original episodes have become comedy gold when isolated and shared online. The show has essentially become a meme generator, producing content that takes on a life of its own in the digital world. The guest star roster for Family Guy reads like a who's who of entertainment industry legends. What's remarkable is how many A-list celebrities have been willing to appear on a show that regularly mocks celebrity culture and Hollywood excess. Some guests have even allowed the show to create entire episodes built around making fun of their public personas. The fact that these stars are willing to be the butt of the joke shows either remarkable good humor or excellent agents who understand the value of staying relevant. But let's get back to the truly weird stuff. Did you know that the show has featured several episodes that were never supposed to air? These lost episodes contain content so strange or controversial that network executives decided they crossed lines that shouldn't be crossed. Some of these episodes have leaked online over the years, while others remain locked away in the Fox vault, possibly never to see the light of day. The existence of this hidden Family Guy content has spawned entire online communities dedicated to tracking down and sharing these forbidden episodes. The show's approach to historical events is particularly interesting. Family Guy has tackled everything from the Kennedy assassination to 9/11, often in ways that push the boundaries of good taste. What's fascinating is how the show uses humor to comment on serious subjects, while simultaneously acknowledging that some things probably shouldn't be joked about. This creates a strange tension where the show is both deeply irreverent and oddly respectful at the same time. The technical aspects of producing Family Guy have evolved dramatically over the show's run. Early episodes were animated using traditional cell animation techniques, while later seasons rely heavily on computer-generated imagery. This transition has allowed for more complex visual effects and smoother animation, but it's also changed the fundamental look and feel of the show in subtle ways that longtime fans notice immediately. One of the most bizarre aspects of Family Guy lore involves the show's relationship with its own cancellation. The series was actually canceled twice by Fox, only to be brought back due to popular demand and strong DVD sales. This cancellation and resurrection cycle has become part of the show's mythology, with episodes regularly making jokes about their own temporary death. Few television series have turned their own mortality into a running gag quite so effectively. The scientific accuracy, or complete lack thereof, in Family Guy episodes could provide material for an entire physics course on what not to do. The show regularly features characters surviving impacts that would kill normal humans, objects behaving in ways that violate basic laws of physics, and medical situations that would be impossible in reality. While this is obviously intentional comedy, the sheer volume of scientific impossibilities in each episode is actually quite impressive from a creative standpoint. As you're drifting off to sleep tonight, consider this final thought. Family Guy has been on the air for so long that there are now adults who have never lived in a world without the Griffin family. For an entire generation, the bizarre logic of Family Guy humor has been a constant background presence in their lives. The show has shaped comedy sensibilities, influenced internet culture, and created a shared cultural language that spans multiple generations. The random facts we've explored tonight barely scratch the surface of the Family Guy universe. Behind every episode lies a web of creative decisions, production challenges, and cultural commentary that reveals far more depth than the show's crude humor might suggest. Whether you love it or hate it, Family Guy has undeniably left an indelible mark on television history and popular culture. So as you close your eyes and let sleep take over, remember that somewhere in the world, animators are working on the next batch of Family Guy episodes, creating new random facts that will someday keep future generations awake at night, wondering how on earth such a bizarre and wonderful show ever came to exist. Sweet dreams, and may your subconscious be filled with the chaotic energy of the Griffin family and their endlessly entertaining dysfunction.